Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Our Lady of Victory Basilica, Shrine and Basilica. Is anybody in this building for the first time? Thank you. Well, welcome. And know that you are always welcome here. There are wonderful Catholic services here, obviously every Sunday and every day of the week. But the building is also open all day, I think 7 days a week. It's a wonderful place for services. It's a wonderful place for unbelievable music, cultural events. But it's also a place that when we're not doing this, it is incredibly peaceful. It's a wonderful place to just sit after a long day at the RTF. It's a wonderful place to just come and unwind before it's time to go home. So know that this is your home, and please come here whenever you'd like. Father Baker built this, and he rests peacefully right over there in the near the grotto. And he built it in devotion to our mother, Our Lady of Victory, Mary. And he built that because he, at one point, decided in his life to become a priest. But that was after he fought in the Civil War. It was after he owned a business. And you can read all about it in this book. It is kind of a pitch, but only that I think it's a wonderful book. We make it required reading on the board. By the way, I'm Pat O'Leary. I'm board chair. I've been around for 15 years as a volunteer. And I'm honored to be with all of you and to be in the presence of Our Lady and Father Baker. But Father Baker really understood mission, and he understood the importance of doing what was right for people. And he really believed that everybody deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. Everyone. And you would see that over and over again if you read this book. That's important because that's what you do. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit about that today, and then I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, who has received questions from a lot of you, and a lot of you who aren't here. And she'll walk through where we're going as an agency, and she'll answer some of those questions. But mission is really critically important to what we do, and this is really the final building that was built by Father Baker and all those people who helped Father Baker along the way. This was kind of the capstone to his career before building an orphanage and the protectory and all these homes over on Martin Road, and then all the other things that we've done in the decades since that we've done in his honor. But he didn't do it alone. He did it with the Sisters of St. Joseph, wonderful women, other priests, other religious, and thousands of people like you, associates who became a part of this organization, a part of this family. And he also understood, because he was a businessman, that money was needed. And so he worked with New York State and Erie County, just like we do today. And he also worked with donors, people who made a difference for us because they believed in what we do. They believe, like Father Baker did, that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And so they give of their time and their treasure to us. And the people that help make that happen, there's a couple of them in the building, they're back there. David Kirsten and Eileen, if you'll both stand up, please. Little hand. You'll see in a little while, we're a $62 million organization. That's a lot of money. Believe it or not, that most often falls short of the expense to run the operation. And so, David, Eileen, and his team, and their team over at Our Lady of Victory Charities is our fundraiser. And they literally raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for us every year so that we can keep programs that maybe are mission important, but they don't have enough money from the state to maintain themselves. These folks help us raise that money so that those programs continue. And we're always looking at programs, and we add new programs, and we move away from programs, and you're not going to hear any big news today, so don't worry about that. But these folks are really critically important to the money side of the mission, as well as the mission side of the mission, because you know who gives the most today to OLV? It's people who have a devotion to Mary. It's people who have a devotion to Father Baker. It's people who come to this church and people who go to church. So there's a heavy influence on the Catholicity or the Catholic side of those who donate here. And so they give because they feel like they're part of this family. The Catholic family, but this family, and the Father Baker family. So those things are all critically important in order for us to run the operation. You are critically important to run the operation because you've chosen, probably not for the money, to work here, right? Cindy will talk a little bit about how we pay and how we get to the ability to do that and how we would love to pay more. And we work with the state all the time. Make sure that we have the best possible packages and benefits of salaries for each and every one of you. But you do it also because you love to come here, because you could work at Mighty Taco for the same amount of money sometimes. And we know that. I don't say that jokingly. I know that that's really what some of you could do. But Father Baker, as you'd see in this book, has 3 examples that I always talk about. And I can do them quick, so I won't be standing here much longer. But to emphasize his importance around dignity and respect for every life, fighting in the Civil War on the north side, when they dredged the Buffalo River back at the turn of the century, they found babies, infants, in the river. And that's because people didn't want those children. So Father Baker said, if you don't want them, bring them to me. I'll put a crib here. You open the door, you place your child there, and I'll make sure they're taken care of because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And that's how the orphanage was essentially born. Thousands of babies went through. He couldn't do that today, but in his time, he found a way. When Catholics in Western New York, black Catholics in Western New York, were looking for a place to worship, and think about it, the turn of the century, prejudice, segregation, racism, things that still exist today. Father Baker said, they can come and worship with me. I'll say Mass with them, I'll eat with them, I'll break bread with them. They're children of God. They need to be treated with dignity and respect. And when he showed up on this campus and he saw bars on the window with a protector, he said, take the bars down. These boys aren't criminals. These are God's children. We treat them with dignity and respect. And so today, for the thankless job you do every day, not today. Today we say thank you to you because the bars still aren't on the windows and we've got some really traumatized people that we take care of. But there's no bars on these windows because each of you come to work every day to treat people with dignity and respect. You don't walk the floor and the halls that Father Baker walked. You do the work that Father Baker did and the Sisters of St. Joseph did. And I, for one, am immensely proud and awestruck by the work you do every day. I get to sit in meetings and talk about it all the time, and I hope that in some way I make your life a little better and those people that you care for, and I'll keep doing that for as long as they'll ask me to be here. But I can't thank you enough for what you do. I have a full-time job. I would much rather do this every day. So I love being a part of the organization. I'm glad that you do too. You have a terrific leader in Cindy Lee. John Brennan is here. He's another one of our board members. Take a quick stand, John. Say hello. You have a great leadership team. So I'm going to turn this over to Cindy, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you. I really, truly mean it from the bottom of my heart for all you do. Thank you.
I don't need that. That's a really hard act to follow. For those of you who were hired after May of 2019, I'm Cindy, and I became the CEO in May of 2019. And I want you to think about that, date, and then think about what happened on March 17th of 2020. So I was the CEO of OLV for 10 months, trying to figure out what I was doing and how I was doing it, and then a pandemic hit. And all of our lives changed. And when I was putting together this presentation, I was thinking about my start and what I wanted to accomplish and trying to figure out how would I get to know all of you and be able to express my appreciation for what you do. And I started thinking about what's happened since March 17th of 2020. And Western New York could not have taken any more punches than it has. So you think about it. We have had a tragic shooting at Tops. We've had 2 back-to-back blizzards that people lost their lives in. We had a horrible house fire not too long ago where 5 children passed away. You are all connected. Many of you live here. Some of you may be related to people who lost their lives or really are struggling through this time since March 17th of 2020. And then I think about, we try to take a break, right? We try to take a mental break and just have some downtime and enjoy a hobby. So we tune into the Buffalo Bills game on Monday. And for those of you who are not Buffalo Bills fans, Jay Pratt, Waikisha Henson, you cannot not be affected by what happened Monday night. And I was driving to work the next day, and I was speaking to a colleague of mine today about this pit that I had in my stomach since Monday. And I couldn't figure out why. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I nervous about this meeting on Thursday? No, I'm not nervous about that. I've done this 1,000 times. What is it? And it became very clear to me that it's about collective trauma and the cumulative effect of what's happened to every single one of us since March 17th of 2020. We lost a lot of employees to COVID. We lost a lot, particularly in our IRAs, a lot of individuals that we care and supported, maybe not due to COVID, but we lost them. And when I really started thinking about that, what I wanted to say to you as a result of that is my gratitude to you for showing up. You showed up, and you continue to show up. And I know how hard that is. You are able, somehow, I'm going to attribute some of it to the efforts and the great work of Hallie Lavner and her team in bringing this agency along as a trauma-informed care agency. There's opportunities that are offered to all of us to come together and to talk about what we're feeling and what we're going through. A lot of my colleagues, my CEO colleagues in agencies locally and downstate, don't have the staff that I have. They didn't weather this period of time as well as we did. And so I really can't express enough my gratitude to you for making OLV Human Services what it is. Because not one single person doesn't make this happen. Father Baker did. I apologize, Father Baker. He started it, and you guys definitely continue it. So as you know, I had asked people in the agency to submit questions or comments or just things they wanted to know more about in advance of this meeting. And there's a risk in doing that. When you allow people to anonymously give you feedback and input and ask questions about your leadership, you have to be a pretty secure person to be able to open those up and read those. But again, it was reinforced for me how privileged I am to work with all of you. The questions were professional. They were very appropriate. And my board member over here, John Brennan, periodically asks me, what keeps you up at night? I don't know why he asked me that, because then it just reminds me of everything that keeps me up at night. But when I opened these questions that you all asked, almost every single one of them hit on what keeps me up at night. So I thought this was a fabulous opportunity for us to just have an open dialogue about the things that's on your mind, be able to shed maybe a little insight for you on some of the challenges that we grapple with as administrators, and hopefully give you some more insight into how we operate. So these are the broad topics that were raised, and I just thought I would start with a couple that are just easier to answer than other ones. So I was asked about vaccination requirements, and when would restrictions on individuals who are not vaccinated be lifted to work in other parts of the agency? That is not our decision to make. That is dictated by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is a federal governmental arm, and they and the Department of Health have instituted a vaccination requirement for those working in a residential treatment facility and in the dental clinic. So until they lift that restriction, we can't. So it's a requirement from them. I was also asked about recycling efforts. I know that, about 6 years ago when I started, there was a well-coordinated recycling effort in the agency, and I don't know how long ago that went away, but someone asked me about that and wanted to know, why does everything go to the landfill? Why aren't we doing that? So everything doesn't go to the landfill. In fact, nothing goes to the landfill. We have an agreement with a company called Coventa, who takes all of our garbage, all of our batteries discarded, et cetera, and they incinerate it for renewable energy. So I don't want you to be worried that we're continuing to pollute the environment and not turn things into usable energy. I was asked a lot about facility use and vacant space. So Karen Ruff Langdon, we're singing your song right now. I was asked about program plans that get talked about with you to try to do some planning that we get excited about that then don't come to fruition. I share that frustration with you. If I could control every single program that we would implement and be able to make my own approvals or have my board do an approval without the state of New York having to weigh in on whether we're allowed to do it or not, every single thing that we would want to do, we would do. Sometimes we get pretty far down the path of a program creation. We do the budget, we talk about staffing, I get all the approvals internally that I need to receive, and then whichever O agency, I'll say OMH because I was on a call with them an hour ago, OMH will say, nah, you can't do it. So we put all that work in, we engage you, we get excited, and then we're told that we can't pursue it. Doesn't mean we don't continue to try though. So I'm pretty good at trying to figure out the way I can get in there and get an approval. So, we keep at it, but that's definitely not a fault of anybody within the agency, losing enthusiasm. It's because we aren't getting cooperation from the funders. Efforts to put new programs in available facilities. We talk about that all the time. Any of you that work with Jay Pratt, Jay is our Chief Officer of Residential Services, so he is really focused on our vacant facilities, what can we put there, what's the community need, how do we get approvals, etc. Here's a frustration point for you. Jay turned himself inside out this year for Miller House that's near St. John's Parkside and got approvals through the International Institute of Buffalo, which works with immigrants, the immigrant population coming in. And we hear and we read a lot of headlines about these people don't have anywhere to go, they need temporary housing until we can source a permanent place for them to live. Jay did all the chasing, tracked it all down, got a contract executed, and those people dried up. Nobody was referred to us. So then you got to go through the whole process of undoing all that contract. So we feel like we're chasing our tail a lot, and we are. But it doesn't mean that we aren't ideating and welcoming ideas from you. One of the things if you remember nothing else I say today, one thing I do want you to think about is you are in the midst, most of you, of what's really happening. You have your finger on the pulse of this community or the communities where you live. And if you see a need, if you see a service gap, if you say, my gosh, why isn't OLV doing this? Let us know that, because we don't have that kind of visibility all of the time. And it may be the very thing that's like, aha, we do have a site that we might be able to do that, and we're willing to do that work to try. And then out of the box thinking for facility use. Again, Karen Ruff Langdon and Jay work very closely on that, trying to make the best use of our facilities. Jay's been so far out of the box, I think he forgot where he put it. And he's really trying to figure out what is going on in this community and how do we leverage the use of our facilities the best. So those were great questions. I'm glad you're thinking about it. And because you're thinking about it, please tell us what you're thinking about, because it may be something that we have never really considered that could be a real possibility. I received a number of questions, personnel related or work related. Interpersonal conflict between employees. So there was a couple of questions about that. What do I do if I have a problem with an employee that I work with and their supervisor is protecting them. Or my problem is with my supervisor. Who do I go to? There's a hierarchy. And if you are not comfortable going to your supervisor about an issue, and that happens, I get that. Go to another supervisor or go to HR. You know, HR can really help you problem solve what's the best way to get this conflict resolved in the most expeditious manner so that we can all work together to move forward. The reality is we don't always love everybody we work with. Sometimes I don't even like them. And I'm not asking you to love the people you work with, but what we are asking is to be respectful and work through those conflicts in a professional manner. And if you need help doing that, that's what HR is for. If they don't have somebody within HR that can do that with you and for you, they'll find somebody who can. Summer program, optional or half day. That was a very timely question. That came out of the education department. Stephanie Guadagna and I talk all the time about how do we leverage what we're doing to do the best that we can for kids and do it in a fiscally responsible manner. And you all know that summer school is very poorly attended. It causes financial problems for us that don't just bother us or hit us in the summer. They linger into September, October, November. So it's not like it's a one-hit issue financially. So more to come on that topic. Some of it is driven by the child's individualized education plan. So if the kids that we have here have 12-month programming on their IEP, we can't just unilaterally decide we aren't going to offer that. We certainly can't do that without talking to our component school districts that refer the kids to us and making sure that we're working in collaboration with them. But we are open, and now is a perfect time to talk about creative ways to allow you, if you're an educator, to have some downtime in the summer, or to make better use of the time that we have if we are going to operate a summer program. Recognition of employee efforts. So, John Brennan, this is probably one that really keeps me up at night, and it might sound ridiculous to all of you. As an executive leadership team, we talk all the time about how can we say thank you to the staff. You know, during COVID, we were racking our brains with, well, we could send a pizza over there, and we could send t-shirts over there, and we could do this. And I know that some people are motivated by different things. So some of you might think, man, t-shirt's fantastic. I wanted another one. I really love that pizza. Thanks, Cindy. You thought about us at dinner. We're busy. Can't you write me a check? I get it. If I could write you all a check for the value that I think you bring to this agency, I'd do it right now. But in a minute, I'm going to explain to you why that is not entirely possible and why you sometimes hear us talk about, we can't get a wage increase this year, et cetera. Please know that our efforts to recognize your efforts come from a really good place. We don't intend to be disrespectful. We don't intend to minimize the impact on you as a professional, the time away from your families, et cetera. And if you have ideas about how you may want to be recognized that we haven't landed on yet, please tell us what that is. If you don't tell me, I don't know. And if I'm trying to do something as a gesture of thanks and it's missing the mark, you need to tell me that too, because it's not intentional. Retention of staff, that's the other thing that keeps me up at night. Staffing. You can't have a day in this space talking to anybody who works in the human service arena right now without staffing coming up as a barrier or as the issue as to why employees aren't safe. The kids we serve aren't safe. The adults we serve aren't safe. Our HR department is working diligently to try to solve that problem. Our board helps us try to solve that problem. I don't know where everybody is that used to have jobs and now I don't know how they're paying their bills. But we are really trying to work on those retention efforts. And a lot of times, I'm going to defend our Human Resources Department for a second because a lot of times people will point right to HR and say, why don't we have all the staff? They're bringing the staff in. The retention piece is at the program site. It's culture, it's support, it's trust. It's knowing that when I go to my job, wherever it is, that there's a team of people there that are on the same page as I am. And I feel like I belong when I go there. So your efforts to welcome your colleagues help that retention number, more so than anything Human Resources could do. So I appreciate the efforts you take to welcome new people onto your team. Working from home. COVID, all of a sudden we're in our office and now we're working from home. And I don't know about you guys, but that was a really hard transition for me to make. I think I gained 40 pounds. I forgot how to wear regular clothes. My dogs were obnoxious while I'm trying to have Zoom meetings. How many times have you found yourself saying, "You're on mute, can you hear me? Oh, sorry." You're doing all these conversations over Zoom. But as we worked our way through that period of time and got back to some sense of normalcy, lots of organizations across the US, not just us, developed working from home policies for people in jobs for whom that would be possible. So some of you are not in jobs like that, and I recognize that. The monitoring of working from home, I was asked that question about, do you monitor people? Yes, we do. One of the best ways to monitor the productivity of people working from home is, are they getting their work done? Because if they're not, in our business, with the kinds of jobs that those people do, that would become readily apparent. Budgets wouldn't get done, people wouldn't get hired, the payroll wouldn't go out. We would definitely know that. So we are monitoring it. We do have a work from home policy. It's constantly being looked at and revised, don't we? Did we write it yet? Yeah, okay. Sometimes John will send me all these policies and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got 35 in my inbox. I haven't read them all. So for those of you that don't have the ability to work from home because you're on that front line, you're the front facing with our clients, I understand that question. I understand how it can feel unfair. And I don't have a good response to you for that. It's totally dependent on the job and the role that you play anywhere, this agency or anywhere else. And then IT transition. So you know that over the past year or so, we've been going through a transition to a new IT vendor. And we're in the midst of lots of shifts right now. And the frustration that we experience sometimes with not being able to access a database that you have to get at, or you can't get into a system that you need to be able to get into, or you don't have a laptop and you're a new employee and it hasn't come yet. I get it. That's all happened, and probably more. You could probably tell me more. We are working through those issues. Don Leslie is our Chief Information Officer. He works very closely with Synergy, who is our IT provider. And I just want you to remember what a massive undertaking that kind of transition for an agency our size is. So I thank you for your patience with that, but if you are experiencing IT challenges that are preventing you from being able to do your job, please don't just sit and wait for it to get better. You gotta call somebody. And if you don't get an answer there, call the next person, above them, and keep calling, because there's enough things that get in the way of our productivity and being able to actually focus and do our jobs. IT shouldn't be one of those. So please don't be silent on that if you're experiencing those challenges. As you can imagine, I got quite a few questions about compensation and PTO. So one of the questions was around PTO allocations, allotments, who gets what and why, and how's that decided? Well, a lot of that is if you're in a union, it's decided there through your union contract. If you are not in a union, it's decided through our non-union PTO policy. And then another question that actually was asked a couple times, so I thought it was valuable to answer, is about holiday pay. Why don't I get holiday pay? Let me give you an example of why you might not. Depends on your schedule. So let's say that I am an employee and I'm scheduled to work Wednesdays through Saturday, and the holiday falls on a Monday. I won't get holiday pay, but I also don't have those 7.5 hours deducted from my PTO bank. Does that make sense? So I have a Monday through Friday schedule, theoretically. If a holiday falls on a Monday, I get that holiday pay, but I also get 7.5 hours deducted from my PTO bank. So it's all dependent on what your schedule is. If you still have questions about it, it doesn't make sense to you, please talk to your supervisor. And again, if you don't get satisfaction there, and the HR department is probably going to murder me in the parking lot when I leave, I'll call HR. Somebody there will be able to explain that to you. I was asked a couple of questions about staff that was reassigned during the shutdown during COVID to some of our residential sites. I think this mainly affected primarily education staff that was reassigned. The reason that we did that was because one of our primary goals when we were all directed to shut down and go home was to keep our people employed. And when we sat as an executive leadership team, we were talking about what other agencies were doing. And what a lot of other agencies were doing was furloughing or laying off their staff. And we felt, why would we add another stressor onto our employees if they're out of a job? And now they're sequestered at home, and they don't have access to their support network, all of those considerations that we talked about. So staff were reassigned. Now that real question, some people chose not to be reassigned, and that was okay too, that was their choice. The real question in here though was about incentives. So as many of you know, OMH came through with some incentives, for people through COVID, OPWDD, OCFS, It depends on where you were reassigned and what monies became available from that state oversight agency to then be allocated to those hours within those sites. So if you feel that you were missed, that you should have received something and you didn't, call HR, no. But really you should call HR. Talk to your supervisor first. They probably know the answer because they worked in very close collaboration with finance and with HR when we were trying to figure out, trying to keep track of all of that, who worked where, when, and why, and was it over their regular hours, was a massive undertaking. Are we perfect? No, we're humans. If you felt like you were missed, let us know, and we'll do our best to investigate it. Being fairly compensated in relation to your education and experience. Again, that depends on what job you were hired into. If you're a union employee, your union contracts dictate where you fall in terms of the salary schedule, the wage schedule, et cetera. If you're not in a union and you feel like you were not given sufficient credit for your previous experiences or your education, ask the question. Don't ask me because I won't know. Guess who you ask? HR. Talk to your supervisor first. Donna's giving me like daggers right now. Always start with your supervisor first. They can ask questions on your behalf. But we really want to answer your questions. I don't want anybody walking around this agency wondering and feeling like they've not been treated fairly and not have really gone through the steps to try to get to the final answer. And you might have to go through a few people to get that before you get there. And then raises based on the department you work in. Somebody asked me that question, why are raises dependent on where I work within the agency and what I do? And then the other question was about, are we going to receive cost of living adjustments because, let's face it, cost of gas went up, cost of food went up, cost of housing went up. There were a number of questions related to that, which told me something very important. We've not done a good job of explaining to you how we're funded. And I think once you understand that, I'm hopeful that you'll have a better insight into decisions that are made and why they're made relative to your compensation. So before I get into those details, I did want to share this with you. You heard Pat reference our $62 million budget. That doesn't mean we have $62 million laying around. I certainly wish that we did. The breakdown that you see here is each major funder of us and the percentage of that overall budget that is in that department. So state ed is by far our largest program. And then over there is what we budget for those programs, which totals $62,008,000. Now, the ones that are going to turn red here in a minute are the ones that are persistently and significantly in deficit. So when you see that, when you see the New York State Education Department and we budget $23,461,000, it costs us more than that to run those education programs. These are our largest programs and they're in deficit position. Now, I don't want that to scare you. This is not news. Pat O'Leary's been on the board how long, Pat? 14 years. Have we ever not been in deficit in many of these places? A couple times. It's because of the way New York State works with agencies like ours. So I want to explain that to you. How are we funded? About 98% of our funding comes from the state of New York. Office of Mental Health, Office of Child and Family Services, Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, New York State Education Department, Department of Health, county contracts, et cetera. About 1.5% to 2% comes from our mission partners, OLV charities. Now, 1.5% to 2% doesn't sound like a lot. 1.5% to 2% of 62 million is a big number. We couldn't do it without their support. And that is important for you to remember. Because when you're operating in a deficit position and they're mission-centric programs that you would never want to discontinue, I have a responsibility to the board to make sure I'm running a financially healthy organization. Most businesses would never survive if they went to their board of directors and said, hey, we're going to be in a deficit of X million dollars this year, but we're going to keep going. But that's the business that we're in. So we have to have partners that assist us with trying to close those gaps. The most important thing, second most important thing I want you to remember today is that we are what's called a deficit-funded organization. Any human service agency that deals with the state offices that we deal with are what's called deficit funded. Let me make that very easy for you to understand. If I walk over to Hallie Lavner and I say, Hallie, I'm gonna borrow $100 from you, okay? Hallie's like, of course, Cindy. So she gives me $100. But she says to me, you gotta pay me back next week. I'm like, I got you, Hallie. I go back next week and I hand Hallie $50. And Hallie goes, hey, what, Cindy, I gave you 100. I said, yeah, I know, but I only have 50 to get back to you. And if she's lucky, I went back to her the next week. With the state agencies, they give us money. Our expenses far outpace the revenue, and they base the rate methodology, and they're all different. They all operate on a different rate methodology. For most of our partners are based on the spending of 2 years prior. So think about that. The rate that we get to operate the RTF is based on what the RTF spent 2 years ago. So think about your own budget at home. If you were doing your budget today, you would base your budget on what you make today, right? Not the state. They would want you to make your budget based on what you made 2 years ago. Who cares if you bought a new car, a new house, your expenses went up, your bills went up, your utilities went up, doesn't matter to them. That's how we're funded. And so that's why when we are grappling with wage increases for you, it's tied to this. And I will tell you very plainly, we do not get enough money from the state of New York to run our programs. Thank God for OLV charities, because that is what allows us to be able to continue. How do we deal with this? You might think, oh my gosh, this can't go on forever. You're right, it can't go on forever. So we engage constantly, the administrative team, with what's called rate reconciliation, rate appeals, and waivers into each of these agencies if they have a process. So, just as an aside, OPWDD, which cut their rate on us in the last year, so the revenue we're getting from them does not cover our expenses, but basically OPWDD says too bad. There's no process to appeal with them. You just figure it out. OMH, state ed, they have an appeals process. And these fine folks right here are the ones who deal with that in finance. That process is incredibly difficult, and it takes a really long time. We have rate appeals into the state education department right now from 2015, 2016, all the way up to right now. And they're not acted on, and they've had them for 2 years. And as I stand in front of you right now, we do not have a rate from the state education department to even know what our per pupil revenue is going to be right now. So we're challenged with building a budget with targets I can't see. So I don't ever want you to think they're withholding all this money. I mean, I'm nothing but an open book. I've got no hidden agenda. I received an email from someone who said, this company makes millions. Why am I only getting paid $15 an hour? We don't make millions. I wish we did. It costs millions to run this agency, but we aren't getting that kind of support. But we continue to fight the fight, and we will continue to do that. And we do that for you. We do it for you and for the people that you're supporting, because that's where that money goes. But the way that it's structured right now, dollar in, dollar out. Well, it's usually $1 out, 50 cents in, is really the reality of how it goes. And then there's this pesky little thing we have to deal with that are called paybacks. You might hear them referred to as clawbacks. That's real, and it happens. So you just heard me reference that some of the education staff during the pandemic were reassigned to residential sites to fill in gaps and to keep them employed. The state education department, however, continued to pay for those positions in a school that wasn't open, and they weren't being utilized that way. So guess what? We owe that money back. So not only don't we get a sufficient rate, what we do get, if it's not utilized in the exact way that it's intended, we have to give that money back. So that's an additional challenge that we have financially as we're trying to figure out how to keep everything going. And you know how they say the more things change, the more they stay the same? So our battles with New York State are constant. And Pat referenced the book, The Father of the Fatherless. This excerpt is in there from Father Baker having his battles with the state of New York as he's trying to run this organization. And in 1900, and I just want you to read the yellow part, which is, he's talking about public officials, state agencies, who have apparently been interested solely to save money for their localities. So in 1900, Father Baker was grappling with that issue, and it's 2023, and we're grappling with that issue. So do I think this problem's going to be solved during my tenure as a CEO? No. Does it mean that I'm not going to try? Also no. I had a call today on this very topic. We're fighting for this for you and for the people that we serve, and we'll continue to do so. But that is like a very high-level context around what happens in this agency financially and how the money flows. I was asked some questions also about any closings, restructuring, growth, et cetera. I know I sent an email out to the agency after the initial announcement of an agency-wide meeting because, you know, the wheels go like that. And people start talking like, what is she going to talk about? What does she want to do? And it got back to me very fast that, Cindy, people think we're closing. We aren't closing. You know, when I talked about the fact that the pandemic happened 10 months after I became the CEO, I've not had the opportunity to have a meeting like this with all of you. This, to me, is standard operating procedure. You should always know annually what's going on. Where are we headed? What are you up to? What are you doing? How can we help? So this is my first opportunity to do that. I was asked, are there programs at risk of closure or restructure? And the answer to that question is every program, every year is looked at. We have to, for all of the reasons that I just described. Sometimes it's a financial, we're looking at it, and the board is saying to me, how long are we gonna let this go? Can we fix it? Can we right the ship? Can we get it to break even? Sometimes it's a shift in community need. The referrals aren't coming in for certain programs. And when your supervisors are on you about census, get them in, get them in, get them in, that's why. Because the dollars follow the people, right? And that's what helps us remain viable. Another sort of transparent story, When we have made the very difficult decisions to shrink or eliminate a program, first thing I want to say is that those are not easy decisions. We don't want to ever have to close anything. We would love to just be able to continue to grow it if it's meeting a need, enhance it, create new ones if we can. But it's been said to me in the past, when we've had to make those tough decisions, you are not following Father Baker's legacy. What would Father Baker say if he knew you just did that? And I want you to know that the third thing that keeps me up at night is Father Baker's legacy is not closing on my watch. Could you imagine? And I am 100% dedicated to continuing his legacy. We, as a leadership team, are constantly focused on, okay, there's a need over here. Let's balance it with the financial reality. Can we do it? Do we want to do it? Can we afford to do it? Is there going to be support? Those are the questions that we ask each other almost every single day. That's what most of our meetings are about. And to really make the point, Father Paul does a mission moment for us at our Mission, Heritage, and Facilities Committee. And he did one for us not so long ago, and I remembered it because it helped me feel better about having to make tough decisions sometimes around program closure. And you can read that while I talk, but in a nutshell, he had opened a soup kitchen during the Depression, and he was feeding just the community. He was feeding the community. 24,000 meals, 77,000 loaves of bread, et cetera. He started that in 1931. Very Father Baker thing to do, right? In 1933, he stopped it because he couldn't afford to keep doing it. And in that book that Pat referenced, he mentioned he had to stop it because the deficit to continue to do it at that time was $159,000. So Google's a beautiful thing. I went into Google and I said, $159,000 in 1933 is how much money today? And it's 1.7 million. We're faced with those decisions every day about the programs that we continue to offer, that we're going to stabilize, that we're going to grow and enhance, or that we might need to shrink or eliminate. When we do eliminate programs, it doesn't mean they're gone forever. I mean, right? The pendulum swings and the cycle comes around. We always would revisit if that community need said, we need this again. So I don't ever want you to think that once we say we're not doing A anymore, that means we're not doing A forever and ever and ever and ever. That's not what that means. The community need and the financial viability need to be balanced. What I was very proud of from all of you was the questions that were focused on the future. I got a lot of questions about, is there a sector or a division of the agency that is the top priority for future growth? It's a very insightful question. Like, where's the state going? Because we're at the mercy of the state sometimes with, what they want us to do, what they don't want us to do, where they want us to focus. Somebody said, hey, couldn't we grow bigger and have more satellite locations? The city of Buffalo is needy. Isn't there an opportunity for us to be able to put some services where we currently aren't? How are we going to respond to the rising issue of homelessness and poverty? How do we inform all of the staff about our program offerings? I loved that question. We talk about that a lot. Sheila Hunt and I'll say, Sheila, do the people over here know what you offer over there? And we've been having really good conversations about making sure all of you know everything that we do so that you can make referrals internally. We can feed our own programs if we're really aware of what they are and who to contact to be able to get that going. And then ensuring continuity of care within the agency. So you all know this better than I do. Someone's ready for discharge from RTF, let's say. Does that mean that they don't get services from OLV anymore? Not necessarily. They might need to be hooked up with home and community-based services. They might need to be, in the workforce development and continue on with Carol Mikowski and what she's doing. But if you don't know about those linkages, you can't make those referrals. So all of these are included, and I'm going to show you in a second, in our draft strategic plan. I'm going to say draft again because my 2 board members sitting in this room haven't seen what I'm going to show you right now, and I don't want to get fired. So I'm telling you, it's a draft. We've been working. Yeah, look at him. He's already like Smithers over there. When just before the pandemic occurred, we were well on our way to a long-range strategic plan. We were talking to each other. We were looking at where we could grow. We were starting to reach out to you guys, and then ding, our lives ended. So now, again, now that we're coming out of that, we've been able to revitalize that. We hired a chief strategy officer, Jeff Papia, who used to be on our board, but I plucked him off of there. And he's here somewhere. He's over there, I think. And he's been leading right now, the executive leadership team in a strategic planning process for the last several months. And why I was so happy about what I saw from all of you is that you are exactly in lockstep with where we are in terms of where we need to go as an agency. You can't see this. I'm just showing you the visual right now. I'm going to show you the breakdown in a second. But we're working on the large objectives for 3 to 5 years. And then we're just now starting to say, okay, what are the actions? What's the, X by Y? Aren't you proud of me? What by when? How are we going to achieve these things? So just to show you where we are, and keep in mind that slide about the future vision and the things that you asked. We want to enhance services for complex children and their families. Our intensive treatment program is exploding. We've got referrals, and we don't have the staff. So we're trying to figure out how do we bridge that, but it's an area of significant potential for growth for the agency. Geographic expansion of services. That's getting our footprint bigger than where it is right now. We have been working with the CEO of Girard Place, who is in, city of Buffalo, to collaborate on services, which gets right at what a comment somebody made of, can't we get into some more of the depressed areas of Buffalo and do some more of our services because we're good at it. So we're working on that. And then housing opportunities and integrated services for youth. And Jay talks about, doing that for adults too, the homeless population, those that are transitioning out of incarceration, people that have lost a job and can't get back on their feet and lost their homes. So we are starting to look at all of those areas that might be services we haven't provided in the past, or building on the services that we currently provide and that we're good at. Always identifying high quality services and outcomes. All of us need to have a target that we can see so that we can all row in the same direction for high quality programs. Disseminating those outcomes internally so that schools know what RTF is doing, and RTF knows what's going on in OPWDD, and finance knows what HR is up to, and just trying to be a more coordinated unit. And then the baseline data, so for example, if we've got an average length of stay in the RTF of, 12 months, I'm making this up. Let's say it's 12 months, that's baseline. A target might be to shorten the length of stay appropriately. We don't want to just start kicking kids out. A target to reach to mean that we can help them get stabilized quicker and return back to their families and to their communities. Being widely known and recognized. The other day I had to call my bank because they shut my card off because they thought there was fraud activity. So I called the bank, and I get this lady, I don't know where she is, and she says, well, I have to ask you some security questions to verify your identity. Okay. She said, where do you work? And I said, well, I work at OLV Human Services. She goes, no, that's not where you work. I'm thinking, well, that's where I go every day. I wonder what I'm doing there every day. And she said, that's not what it says on your record. I go, oh, Baker Victory Services, is that what it says? And she said, yep. I said, okay, well, we rebranded. But she said, Baker Victory, where is that? I said, it's in Lackawanna, New York. And she goes, Father Baker? And I said, yeah. She goes, my God, my brothers were threatened, with being dropped off there. And I just started laughing, and I have no idea where this lady was. She didn't mention where she lived, but she knew that. But what she knew was bad boys. And that persists. Lots of people identify us that way, and we are so much more than that. And so how do we get that word out? A comprehensive marketing campaign. We've been working very closely with our colleagues at Charities to talk to us about how do we get the word out? Who's our audience? How do we craft that message to them about the good work that's going on here? Trying to assess our referral sources, you, the consumers of our services, to try to make sure that our feedback is positive and increasingly positive over time, and then enhancing our community engagement, our collaboration, and our partnerships. We are a huge agency and we're very diverse, but nobody can do everything well. And so starting to identify what are some things we want to do that maybe somebody else does better or already does and we don't, and let's partner with them. So we are starting to reach out and have those conversations with some of our agency partners in the community. Diverse, engaged, and mission-driven workforce. You saw a question was about retention. We know that's a problem. We 100% know that's a problem. So we're going to be coming up with some actions to address that. An agency-wide plan, diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the things that is really important to me is that that is not just a throwaway phrase that we say because somebody says we have to say it. We have to walk our talk. And we are an agency that really does support all. I want that to be true within our workforce too, that we are embracing diversity, that we are focused on equity, equity of opportunities, the way that you're treated, the way you're talked to, et cetera, and inclusion, and meaningful inclusion. Not just saying I included you because somebody said I have to check a box over here to say I did it. Waikisha Hinson runs our DEI, right? You're the diversity, equity, inclusion lady. And I'm really happy about that. And Waikisha and I have had some pretty good conversations in the past about what does that really mean? And so I think that you're going to see some nice growth in the agency and how that all connects with what Hallie's doing over in trauma-informed care. Like, how do we really connect all these dots for us so they don't feel like separate initiatives or separate ways of thinking? And we want you to be satisfied. Are any of us 100% satisfied? No. I'd be happy if you're satisfied enough, though, to feel safe to come to whoever, me included, to say, I don't like this. This is happening, it's not right, and somebody needs to do something about it. I really mean it when I say, you can come and tell me anything. I might not want to hear it, but if it's important to you, then it's important to me. And if I don't know about it, or if a supervisor doesn't know about it, we can't fix it, or address it, or at least mitigate it if fixing it's not possible. And then our infrastructure. So this is where facilities comes in. You saw the facility question, maximizing their use, and making sure the data that we have, we've got lots of data in this agency, finance, HR, there's all kinds of data. It's really hard to get, and so we've been working diligently to try to figure out ways to make that easier. Because if I'm going to ask anyone to try to hit targets that improve the quality of what we do, you have to be able to measure it. And you can't measure it if you can't get at data that lets you know where you are so that you can monitor your growth. So we're working on trying to build that infrastructure also. And then this last quote, a good idea, what good is it if it just remains an idea? You are the heartbeat of this agency. You are. My job is to make sure your heartbeat keeps going. And the executive leadership team and the board, work really hard to try to make sure that what we're doing is what you need us to do. And if we're not hitting the mark, or if we've neglected to consider something that's super important, you have to tell us. And I really mean that. When I started this conversation and said it's a risk to open up an anonymous feedback in a 900-employee organization to me. And I'm like, well, it's anonymous, so they'll say whatever they want. And you did. But again, I'm proud of you because it was so productive. There's more of that out there, and I want to know what it is. So, in closing, I hope this provides you with a little bit more insight into some of the administrative issues that confront us as we try to keep things moving along so you can do your job and have a family life and have a balance. I know that's hard. I know many of you are working multiple hours in a row, and I thank you for it. I'm hoping we'll eventually get to a place where there's a better balance for all of you to be able to really love coming here, really love your personal life all at the same time. And on behalf of the people that you serve, and on behalf of their families and your colleagues and the board and my executive leadership team, thank you very much for all of your efforts and that you choose to use your talents here. It's a privilege to work with you. I am open to questions if anybody has any that came up from what I just rattled through, if you have any. I'm only going to give it a minute. No? I'm sorry, yeah. Okay, there is, and there's a lot of them. There are cookies from Mazurik's. Hallie Lavner is going to beat you all to it, and she's going to eat them all. There's cookies from Mazurik's down in the Marion room, and there's coffee too. Please join us and just hang out for a little bit and have a treat and some coffee. And thank you all for coming. I truly appreciate it.